Leaders love them, peers resent them. High performers. High performers are often the most favored employees of any company, at the same time, the most hated and most resented. How is that even possible? Doesn't make any sense at all on the surface level. But if you dig a bit deeper, you will see that there are a lot of psychological dynamics at play. And if somebody is leading high performers, or is a high performer themselves, or is working with high performers, they'll be better off understanding those dynamics so they can intentionally manage them and steer them in the right direction instead of being a structural victim of those. And what does that mean? I'm going to explain to you exactly how those dynamics play out. High performers are not always driven by success and glory and being in the spotlight. While this is certainly a part of the motivation, a lot of people are working really hard, over-delivering, and giving 100%, sacrificing their personal hobbies, their family, their personal relationships for reasons that you might not always think about. It has often a lot to do with pain. It has often a lot to do with fear. It has often a lot to do with a feeling of inadequacy. And for somebody who sees high performers in action, that sounds a bit odd. This person has everything. There's the success, the medals, the achievements, the track record, the resume. How can that person feel inadequate? Doesn't make sense. If anything, I feel inadequate looking at this high performer. That person must feel extremely adequate. Now, of course, there are also people who perform at a very high level from a sense of adequacy and competence. So far, there's no question about this. But in most cases, it's not like that. Let's trace back a bit what are some typical patterns, some typical fuel sources for high performers. One is a sense of belonging. At some point in their lives, certain individuals learn that their place in a group is dependent on their performance. That the way that they're being perceived, or if they are allowed, or if they're allowed to belong in a group, depends on their usefulness to that group. You will see this very particularly in two different sectors. One is the sports club, when they're children or teenagers. What if they were the team captain and then that captain privilege was taken away from them because they didn't perform well enough with their team for 2 games in a row? That can leave a deep mark and deep scar. You take the second segment, which is school. School, as it is typically set up based on the old school Prussian education system, school is not necessarily designed for increasing the self-esteem or the self-worth of its students. It's often a mechanism for social conditioning and we could call it social pruning, intellectual pruning also in many cases. So what you learn in school is that your value, that the sense of acknowledgement and appreciation towards you depends on how you perform on your grades. Like, are you somebody who is an A-grade student? That's typically seen as something positive. Are you somebody who fails the exams and tests? That's seen as something negative. And now you might think, okay, this doesn't sound really tragic. But think about the scenario. If you fail your test, your math exam, and you don't make it to the next grade, you lose all of your friends. Everybody who you hang out with, everybody who respects you, now just sees you as a loser who didn't make it to the next grade. The social pressure is enormous. And as children who grow up in these schooling systems, the message is very clear. You better keep up with a certain level of performance, or there will be a painful rejection by the tribe. You will lose all of your friends. And those are just a couple of factors that play into it. And so we often learn that in order to be part of a group, in order to have our place in a company, our place in an organization, we need to perform. And there's certainly merit to this idea. I mean, a company is a commercial organization and has goals. It needs people who are in there to perform those goals, to get to those goals. That's absolutely clear. There's no question about it. The question is, like, how far do you take it in terms of pain? You see a lot of people who may have failed in one area of their life. It could also be a relationship, whatever. And then they find a sense of success and a sense of satisfaction in their work. Maybe some people have very dysfunctional personal relationships, including family relationships, they find that sense of belonging in their work. And how can they increase, do they have control over that sense of belonging? By producing even more outcomes, achieving more. That gives me applause. Now I'm invited. Now I'm welcomed. Those are very deep mechanisms that many people are not even aware of. And I think can be a rejection of a childhood where somebody humiliated that person and basically said, you're not good for anything, or you want to show this person, or something else where you feel like, I want to be successful and this drives me to show other people, maybe even parental figures, that I'm worth something because they made me feel the opposite. So there are many things that drive high performers. You have to ask yourself, why would somebody stay until 9, 10, 11 p.m. each night in the office while everybody else leaves at 6? Why would somebody give up on their personal relationships so that they can work on the weekend, even if they don't necessarily get more money because of that? And so if you understand that high performers are often, not always, but often driven by pain, and that they have a certain goal by achieving these things, and sometimes it's really vague in terms of, I just hope that good things happen if I perform at this level. Maybe I get a salary raise, maybe get a promotion. I just hope that I'm being seen by my leader and that it will lead to good outcomes. So if you understand that that high performers have a certain goal in the organization that sometimes they're not even aware of by themselves, but their high performance is not just for their own entertainment. They are driven. Now you understand that the moment a leader makes the mistake of using this high performer as the new benchmark, as the new standard for everybody else, they're actually destroying that high performer. Let me explain. The high performer seeks belonging through performance, through being useful, through being a reliable person. And that gives them a sense of, this group will not expel me, this group will accept me. If you now say, everybody else in this group, your job is not secure anymore because you now have to perform at the level of this high performer, of course, everybody will see this high performer, this person, as the reason of why they might lose their job. They will start getting resentful towards this person. They will still admire that person and give him compliments, or her, and praise them publicly and talk about how amazing they are. But internally, they will resent them because their presence is the reason why they are now being put lower in the eyes of the supervisor, the supervising manager, right? Like, why can you not perform like him or her? Like, why can he or she do it, but you cannot? Like, he shows us that that you have all been lazy the whole time. He sets the tone of what is possible in this organization. Why did I not ever see this from you? And the moment the high performer is being placed as the benchmark for everybody else, you have a whole barrage of politics basically kicking off against that person. People undermining them on many different levels. They can typically not undermine the high performer on the performance level, on a professional level, but then they just find personal reasons and whatnot. And it can create even more pressure on a high performer who now realizes that the more successful they are, the more they get isolated. The more successful they are, they actually don't experience the relief of a pat on the back, acknowledgement, even the way sublimated sense of love, of acceptance. The more successful they are, actually the more envy, the more jealousy they attract, the more negativity they encounter, the more they get isolated, the more the tribe rejects them. For a lot of high performers, they just burn themselves into even more work. And for the supervisor, it starts to become a political risk inside the organization to promote, push, or promote in the sense of lift up this high performer, because now that high performer becomes very unpopular behind closed doors. Even sometimes the higher level managers start feeling intimidated or resentful. They always admire the performance, no doubt about it, and when they speak to that person, they will always talk in admiration with that person. But once they turn around, they will just feel intimidated, because if this person would now be promoted, if they had a manager who promotes them to the next level, it would expose all the incompetence at the next higher management level. Often this high performer who spends their weekends learning about the market, understanding the customers better, understanding better what's going on the product side, on the technical specifications, who goes to industry events, who reads books, is often way better equipped to actually create a strategy document or create a plan forward or to solve the problems of the company, because they have way more context and understanding than most mid-level managers who leave at 5 p.m. each day and spend their weekends with their families and do a lot of other things that a high performer doesn't bother with. So it creates a threat. And sometimes managers very much want to promote and want to help the high performer rise, but they fear for their own job. And there is a certain hesitation where they have to be very careful and very cautious about how they proceed with that. And often it leaves the high performer in a limbo state, in a state of constant transition, of constant promises that are never really being materialized. Sometimes the high performer realizes that after people are being hired with double the salary, despite all of their contributions, their salary raise conversation still gets blocked 1 year later. And just the goalposts are constantly being moved. Oh, if you achieve this, if you achieve that, if you do this, if you do that. And every time the high performer achieves it, a new goal is being set. And it happens way more often than you might think. And of course, the company, it's always something, it's the same in change management. People will never resist you actively and explicitly. There are very few people who do this. We should honor them for this, even though they're often the most irritating, but they're actually honest about it. Most people in change management will resist you passively. They will look you in the eye, say, this is an amazing idea, like finally we are doing something about this. And the moment they turn around, they will not do anything. They will just slow walk the whole project to make sure it never really comes to fruition, sometimes even unconsciously. And it's very similar here. The manager who manages a high performer will not explicitly tell the high performer that they're intimidated or afraid of them. They will just slow walk their salary raise. They will slow walk their promotion. Because if sometimes it's really the case that if the company would increase the salary, it would actually be an admission that they underpaid that person the whole time before. It would be an admission that they literally mistreated that person, that they didn't treat that person right. And it's really incredible to see then. You see all kinds of rationalizations. Managers will then say, I cannot increase the salary of this high performer because then everybody else in the team would feel envious and jealous. Because then they would have they're in the same role, the same position, that wouldn't work out. But the same manager does not have a problem putting this high performer as the benchmark for everybody else and making everybody else in fearing their own jobs, that they can keep on to their own jobs, and making them jealous and envious of the high performer. They don't have an issue with that. So it's of course often rationalizations. And those high performers then end up giving it on, hoping that something good will happen. They don't understand why once they stop and look around, they're the only ones who are not getting any rewards for everything that they're doing for the company. Or sometimes building the company where everybody else just leaning back and watching videos at work and like not doing anything really. They know that they are the ones progressing the company, pushing it to the next level. And yet they seem to be the ones who are the least rewarded, despite all of their efforts. And this can trigger an existential crisis for a lot of those high performers, because the entire source code of work really hard, outwork everybody else, and that leads to good results, that will lead to phenomenal results, that will get you ahead in life, that worldview will fall apart. They will realize that it's not hard work that gets you ahead in an employment context. They will see that the person who went on the weekends to play golf with the CEO got the promotion, who didn't do anything for the company, who is known to steal from the bank account, who's known to cheat on customers, who is known to talk dismissively about the CEO and how much he's ripping off the CEO. That person got the promotion because that person went on the golf course over the weekend. Not a high performer who has been working day in and day out on the weekends, on public holidays, until late night every single day. And so for a high performer, they typically realize over time that in the employment context, they're being screwed over. Their efforts, their sacrifice never really translates into a clear financial upside or promotions, salary raises, or even recognition. Often the opposite is the case. Often they're dealing with other employees being resentful about them, attacking them verbally or through office politics, and their managers just stand by and let it happen because they themselves are probably glad that somebody's reining in that high performers that could threaten their own job. They're probably glad that somebody keeps them busy with politics. And often then the whole idea of a meritocracy, the whole idea of effort and hard work and attitude is being rewarded just falls apart. And for a high performer, this can be an existential crisis because sometimes they've built their entire identity on that. And they probably have been operating like this for 10, 15 years. And if they acknowledge to themselves that it was a losing game and that it never led to any of the outcomes that they imagined and hoped, it would also be to admit that they could have spent those 15 years in a wiser manner than spending every weekend at work or reading books about their industry. They probably could have spent time investing in personal relationships, romantic relationships, building a family, traveling the world, doing all these other fun things that normal people do. And so the high performer typically experiences a moment of reckoning. And so many of them burn out at this point. They just, the psychological pressure just becomes too much. And they basically just go into overheating mode. You can always imagine it, where everybody else kept their temperature low and ran a very cost efficient or very energy efficient through their career. High performer burns themselves out. Probably quits the job then. He says, I will be anymore. I'm not progressing. I don't see any future here. Like I don't see why you don't recognize what I'm doing. Why is this not being rewarded? High performer leaves, or maybe has a job offer somewhere else. And in some cases, they don't work for another half year or a year because they're just completely burned out. And burnout is not just being a bit exhausted. It's a nervous system response where you could go to the laptop and actually your body just shuts down. It has nothing to do with your mind anymore or with your beliefs or mindsets or thoughts or anything. It's or your will. It's really the nervous system just not doing it. Nervous system shutting down. And some high performers go through less as burnout, and they take a long time to recover. And so you have to understand the people who drive the company's greatest results are often the ones who are being rewarded the least and who are often being treated really terribly. And they often have to witness how people who are way less talented, way less committed, often fraudulent, and don't care about the company at all, but instead build relationships with the right people and sympathy and whatnot, are the ones who actually get ahead and get the promotions and get the salary raises. So what can a high performer do? If they're lucky, they have leaders who can see the whole game, who do not feel threatened by their presence, but who actually welcome the presence of high performers. So people who are up to a high standard of excellence, who use those high performers as not as benchmarks, but as mentors that give them a role within the team in which they can amplify everybody else's strengths, accelerate everybody around them, help everybody else to get up to that level, motivate them, inspire them by their presence with the full backing of the leader. Where you have a leader who wants to replace themselves by building somebody up who they see has the grit, has the work ethic, has the fire. And they understand that their own promotion depends on finding somebody to fill their shoes. And they do not have an incentive to keep that high performer down. They have an incentive to help lift that high performer to their level. And with high performers, you also have to understand, yes, it's true, often they're being deprived of financial rewards, but first of all, it doesn't mean that they don't want financial, that doesn't mean that they are not also motivated by this, but it also doesn't mean that it's their main priority. Often, high performers are also very much driven by having a place in the team, by being in the spotlight in a positive way, and sometimes that's redemption for whatever happened in their life before, where they get that sense of inadequacy that's now their fuel. And it's also something that their leaders need to understand. You want to give forums, you want to give a role to high performers. You want to give them a role within the company, within the team, where they can shine. And of course, this should also be financially rewarded as well. And it takes a type of leader who is sure about themselves. A leader who does not feel threatened by other people's top performance, but a leader who also understands it's not just pure effort that will drive results, it's also leverage. And that's something that every high performer needs to be coached into. At some point, you reach a level of diminishing returns with high performing. If high performing means that you're constantly on, that you're just the person who gives the most effort, who has the most energy. There's a point when you reach diminishing returns, it doesn't give you the results anymore that you're looking for, and you need to shift modes into leveraged action. You need to take a step back and identify what is actually moving the needle if I focus on it. There are certain actions that I can take that take way less effort. And sometimes I even have to wait until I even get to this action, because I cannot take this action right now. I have to be in a certain time and a certain place. Impatience. And how do I identify what gives me real leverage and then take action and leverage? It requires a shift of mindset from constant busyness to strategy, to strategic thinking. And that's not something that happens overnight. And also, the nervous system is glued to the high performer identity. The entire emotional source code, if you so want, is programmed towards high performance. It feels weird if you're not working. It feels weird if there's white space between an action you took until the result materializes. That can feel weird because you're just wired to constantly do. And once you've achieved something, you already automatically trigger into dissatisfaction mode. You do this intentionally, deliberately, because you learned if you can keep up the dissatisfaction about yourself, it will constantly give you the drive to keep going and keep going and keep going. And again, that was your strategy to get applause. That was your strategy to get admired. But you also realize at some point, it doesn't get you ahead. Like you will always just stay in a certain level. Where you want to be at is at a level where an upgrade, almost an operating system, in your inner operating system, which you go for leveraged action. That means you identify leverage, you know how leverage looks like, you understand that there are certain fewer actions. If you prioritize them and focus on them, they give you exponentially more and better and more significant results. And you also learn how to basically wait and how to not push yourself into the next phase of busyness and get lost and burn yourself out. But there is a space between the leveraged actions that you take and the outcomes that they produce. And if you're lucky, you have a mentor at work who can bring you up there, who has gone that journey by themselves and can guide you to this place where once you are in the mode of taking strategic action, you now apply your work ethic and all your capability, your drive, which is not going to leave just because you step out of busy work. It's not going to be gone. That you have programmed that very deeply into your nervous system. That's going to be there. Don't worry about it. But you now go for strategic leveraged action and you apply your work ethic. You apply your ability to do things at volume, at speed, right? But for the right reasons, for the right actions. You will, of course, charge ahead of others, and your rewards will not be anymore dependent on somebody's approval, somebody's validation, or somebody's insecurities who happens to be your manager. And this is something that's very unfortunate, a lot of those managers pick one particular thing about the high performer. Oh, you have an accent. Oh, your German is not good enough. Oh, I saw you weren't really pushy and aggressive enough in that sales call. I think you're not the right fit. They will find any small reason. Oh, actually, the way you dress, it's not really professional. Oh, the last time you were in a client meeting, you were always assigned. And then they will take that little thing and hold it against the high performer for months, for years sometimes even, just to destabilize them psychologically. Because if constantly the deficiency is being pointed out, the one little irrelevant, nonsensical deficiency, the high performers will always be confused and will not ask for a raise, will not ask for a promotion, but will always be confused. Like, what else do I need to prove so that I can make up for the fact that I was silent in that one client meeting 1.5 years ago? And then finally my manager can see that I'm an assertive, competent salesperson. And so, of course, it's a game you can never win. And it's designed for you to lose. And this will be a residual once you step out of the high performer mode. You have to understand there's high performance in the context of organizations and companies as an employee, and that will always kill you. That game is rigged against you. It will extract from you, but it will not reward you. Except few exceptions, you have amazing leaders who see beyond, right? And who don't feel threatened by your high performance. But this is really, really rare, and you should consider yourself really lucky if that's the case. And then there's high performance on your own terms. And you will need to, once you step out, you need to let go of a lot of those old wounds that are actually being inflicted to you. And you can almost call them psychological control mechanisms of how people in the employment world were trying to hold you down, were trying to undermine you, to destabilize you psychologically and emotionally so that you would not ask for more, to keep you in check, so that you wouldn't become threatening. There's a lot of stuff that you would have to get rid of so that you can function properly on your own, that you can function in more infinite spaces, in spaces where your effort is actually proportionate to outcomes, and where you are in control of the outcomes you're driving, also by focusing on strategic leverage and not just busy work and symbolic action. And this is a massive shift. That's a massive shift of your mental operating system. And it goes beyond the mind. It's really your nervous system. It's a massive shift of how you operate in this world. And if you are a high performer, you have a very strong start, but you also carry a very large burden with you. And it requires some work. It's not that you're not used to work, but it requires some work to shift your gears, to reprogram how you operate, and to move into an operating mode that actually puts you in the driver's seat of your own life, where you move out of the dependency on other people's validation or whether they approve of you or not, and where you move into a space where every action that you do is within your own control. The outcomes are within your own control, and you are not driven anymore, but you are the driver. You're the driver of your own career, of your own financial results, and of your personal life. And that's what I wish for every high performer, whether currently employed and or in a disempowered posture, or recovering, or those who have already made it over the hill. And if that sounds like you can directly reach out to me and work with me on making that shift to a new operating system.